Evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being on this live with me tonight. If you haven't seen my face before, my name's Rosanna, and I am a volunteer with Woodfield as well as a trustee of the charity. So if you didn't know, Woodfield is a registered charity, and we run the pavilion and want to make it into a go-to hub for local communities to learn about art, the biodiversity of Tooting Commons, where we're based, health and well-being. We have many different aims, and this program that I'm doing this month for National Embroidery Month forms part of that. And today I will be showing how to do 3D embroidery using felt. I don't want to claim that this is my idea because I'm sure it's been done before, but you know, people would say to me, do you build up layers just using thread, which some people do, and you can do, but that is very time consuming and also would use a lot of thread. So having an underlayer of felt to bolster up your stitching is a lot quicker and cheaper and easier. So I'll show you some examples of my work. I've got patches that I sort of started out with, and these sort of have really nice, let me turn down the lights, a bit hardcore, have a nice sort of gradient to them. So these are just patches that people can sew on. This is an example as well of one of my brooches. So I've been doing brooches recently. I've got one here with some dangly bits. My mum calls this the Freddie Mercury. What do you think? Pink, this one has braces. So yeah, there's felt underneath these lips here to make them sort of a little bit 3D, stand out. And the more 3D it is, depends on however much felt you are using. So I'm going to talk through that, but what this live, what I won't be doing is showing you the stitching. We're going to get up to that point because this takes longer because embroidery takes time. But if that's something you're interested in, I could do a part 2 where I go over what you do next once you've got your felt underlayers. It's very easy, it's just satin stitch, but I could maybe talk through how I do the gradients with the shading. Blue's quite a nice one. You know, I could talk through that if that's of interest to anyone. So I'm going to get us started. What you need to get started is you need some sort of shape cut out. I do lips, you don't have to. This technique can be used for any shape. Here's mine, very well used and battered template that I use for all of my pieces. But you can use any shape. It's totally up to you. You don't have to do this. But what you do need is some sort of template. And that's really handy if you're going to make more than one as well, because it makes sure that you get a sort of standard size through all of them. So you need some sort of shape cut out. You need a pen. Or you could use a pencil, but on felt, pen is a bit better. Scissors. An embroidery hoop. A needle. Got my needle here. Thread. If you're doing lips, you need white and black at this stage. But if you're doing something else, whatever thread you need. Felt of any colour, it doesn't matter. I have red, because that's what I chose. I don't know why, but it doesn't really matter because you're not going to see it. You know, this has all got red felt underneath. You're not going to see it. The only way you see it is on the back here. So that might be something to think about depending on what you're doing. And then glue. I use fabric glue, just because that's what it's for. It's for fabric. It's specifically for that use. But I mean, a PVA glue is fine. It just needs to be liquid. I wouldn't use Pritt stick might work, but it's something that's more liquidy than that, because felt sucks up a lot of the glue. So this one's really good, high-tack fabric glue. I just got that at a local haberdashery store, and it's really good. It comes with a nice little sort of small nozzle at the top, so you can get quite accurate layers with the glue. And once you've got all your materials, what you want is you want to cut a piece of your felt relevant to the size of hoop you're using. So I'm using quite a small hoop, a 4-inch hoop, and I always say use whatever hoop you're using needs to be the size of what you're doing. So, you know, you don't want to use a huge hoop for something, because then it's just not going to be easy to handle. This is just so much easier. And you know, the design fits within it. So I'm using a 4-inch hoop, and I've cut my fabric so I have, you know, about 1 inch, or I've been a little bit scarce with my thread, with my felt, because I'm used to it, but you need about 1 inch around the edge, as you would normally when doing any embroidery. And the reason I'm actually stitching onto the felt is because I cut out my shapes. If you're doing a hoop art piece, that's not necessarily needed. You could still use any non-stretch fabric like cotton, calico, linen, whatever. But I like to sew directly onto the felt because it's quite a nice, it's thick and it's more stable than gluing layers of felt onto a thinner fabric like cotton or something like that. So I use felt. Then what you want to do is you want to draw your design on the center of your felt. As you can see, here's one I made earlier, art attack style. So yeah, just make sure that design is in the center of your hoop there, in the center of your fabric. If you're following along, I'm going to go quite fast for the essence of time, but this will be recorded and on Woodfield's IGTV, and I'm going to download it and put it on YouTube so you can watch at your leisure. But I'm going to go through it quite fast to give you a taster of what I do. And then you want to, once you've drawn out your design, and if you are doing lips, I fill in the teeth. As you can see, there's no teeth on my design here. I fill in the teeth after I've drawn it, and I just sort of, I do the middle line first because I can go from the cupid's bow down like that, and I use a ruler to go across, and then I just by hand just fill in the other teeth there. Now why I've gone slightly over the line there is because what I'm gonna do is fill in the teeth. And again, here's one I made earlier because this takes a bit of time. So I filled in the teeth, and I first go over the top with white, and I go down with white as a satin stitch. So this line in the middle becomes my barrier. I don't go up and down through all the teeth there. I go up to this line here, and then I do the bottom teeth there. So they cover over the black lines. The white covers over the black lines. But if I do slightly higher at the top there and those little markers, that allows me to know where I put those lines underneath the thread. I learnt that the hard way. But, you know, it's not too much of a deal. You just work it out again, but it makes your life a lot easier. So I've done little sort of almost like signposting myself there. That's where the line was. So that's why I do a little bit above. And whatever shape you're doing, if that's needed, then I recommend doing that because it's a lot easier. So we've got our design. We can then mount our hoop. And if you're completely new to embroidery, I will talk you through how to mount a hoop as well. So a hoop comes with an inner and an outer circle, and as you can see, the tightening mechanism is on the outer circle. Then, I'm just going to tilt down here. You put the inner circle underneath, and you want to center it as much as possible. And you want to, that's not quite center. Put the outer one on top. Like that. It's not quite in the center, but it's okay. As long as the shape is within the hoop, it's fine. And then you want to tighten. Now, felt is thicker than cotton or, you know, linen or whatever. So naturally the hoop gets tighter faster, but it still has that nice drum sound. And that's how you know that it's tight. You want it to be tight. So we've got our hoop and I've done the stitching for the teeth. Now I've done that first because that's not going to be 3D. The lips are going to be 3D. So I've done whatever stitching that doesn't need to be 3D. I've done that first. But I don't actually need this right now because now I need to cut out the shapes in the felt to make the lips. So we need to start building up with layers of felt. However many you do is up to you. It depends on the size of your shape. I tend to do 4 layers for lips because they're quite thin. So as I get up to the 4th layer, they would just disappear. So I tend to do 4. But if you're doing a bigger shape with a bigger area, you could do as many as you want. It's totally up to you. But what we are aiming for it to look like, is a sort of contour map. And so I've done layers here. Here's one I made earlier. Let me just lay those down like this. Hope you can see that. So you can see there's little sort of steps up between the layers as they get smaller and smaller. Almost like a sort of, yeah, a contour map or like a pyramid with steps. So that's what we're aiming for. How do we get there? So you've got your template. You need a spare bit of felt. I'm going to use this bit here. So you just have, this is an offcut, as you can see the remainder of a lip shape there. So I keep all my offcuts as I want to reuse these. And we need to start cutting out our layers using our template. So first layer, and I'm trying to get as close to the edge as possible, not to waste, try not to waste material. So with my pen, I'm going to draw around the bottom lip there. And I'm going to draw around the top lip above it. Can you see what I'm doing here? Like that. Don't worry about the edges. So I've got my shapes there from my template. Now what I want to do is use this as a guide to make a smaller layer inside it. So I don't want to just round those edges off and cut them out because that's going to be the same size as this. I want to make a smaller layer inside it. So I'm going to go about 1 millimeter, like really, really small. And it doesn't have to be precise inside the template shape that I've done. And this, you know, no one's going to see this. It doesn't have to be neat as long as it's sort of an ish regular size. You know, like that. There we go. You can see it within the main shape there. I'm going to do the same for above. Now, as I'm doing lips, I find the Cupid's bow area naturally gets thinnest over time. That's why I end up only doing 4 layers, because by the time I get to 4, there's basically no Cupid's bow left. And also, I don't actually really like this bit, because this isn't embroidery, you know. This is sort of cutting and sticking and whatever. It's a necessary evil, but it looks good. So there you can see I've got my shapes inside my template that I drew. Now you just cut those out. Be careful with your hands on this because you use quite a lot of pen to get it onto the felt, and I find it rubs off onto my fingers, so just be careful with that on your clothes or couch or whatever. And I would recommend using a biro rather than like an ink pen, because I learned the hard way this way as well. Especially for example, if you're using white. So in the past I've used like a sort of more inky pen to draw this out because it's sort of not as laborious as biro. It's sort of, you know, you get sort of a nice line, but it stays wet. And so before my white on my teeth has been discoloured a little bit, or I noticed it's like, oh, that bit looks a bit grey, and it's because as you're sewing, the thread is picking up that pen colour and showing up. So I recommend using a biro instead. Sorry, should have said that. But with these layers, it's not as bad. It's when you're drawing an outline. So we've got our two sort of initial layers. Now these become our templates for the next layers, because we want to go again shorter and smaller. So just like before, I'm going to lie that down. I'm going to draw around it. Same with the top one. It's not very even. If you notice things aren't very even, I just sort of fold it and I can see that little lip there isn't very even. I'm just going to cut that. Draw around it. Again, don't worry about being really neat, no one's going to see it. There we go. So those are my next layers. Then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go, you know, just a millimetre or so inside. But what I'm going to do with the width is I'm going to go about 1/2 centimetre, because I've got more to play with this way. I've got more to play with than I have height-wise. So I'm going to go like 1/2 centimetre in, and that just creates that nice sort of step up. But if you're doing more layers than 4, you could keep going smaller and smaller and smaller. You don't necessarily have to come in that far. It just depends how many layers. And this is, you know, very much trial and error. I've done it different ways in the past. You know, with like the Cupid's bow, I would get to the point where the Cupid's bow would actually disintegrate, so I would just do triangles. Sorry, my there we are. It keeps going, like, even though I'm live, it keeps... Anyway, so here we go. There we go. So I've done my 2 middle layers there again. And I'm just going to cut them out. Then to check that you're happy with it, you can just layer the one you've just cut out on top. Just make sure that that fits. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. There you go. That works. It works for me. cut it out. It's weird being on live on my own. Normally somebody else is doing all the talking. Let me just check that looks good. Yeah, looks good. And you just keep doing that until you've got all of your layers done. And as I said, I'm only going to do 4 because I can only fit 4 in. And I did some earlier just in case I messed up. I'm going to keep going. Just got to check that my iPhone isn't going to go on standby, because for some reason, even though I'm on live, it keeps sort of blacking out and turning off. So there we go. My 3rd layer. I'm on my 3rd layer now. Getting smaller and smaller. Now, something you need to bear in mind with this technique is that whilst you can do shading, as I've shown with my patches, you can do shading like over the top of the pieces. You can't stitch into them because it just wouldn't work, because the felt is too thick, and I don't think it would have the same effect. I think it would sort of make things a bit lumpy. So that's something to bear in mind, that you can obviously create nice sort of shading this way, but it's almost like, you know, imagine making a mound out of dirt or something, and then you cover that with a layer of grass. The grass doesn't sort of like go into it, it just covers it like a little hill. That's what we're doing with the felt and the thread. You know, I can imagine this being used. I've only ever used it for, you know, for lips, but I can imagine it being used on lots of things. I think it would have a really nice effect. Okay, on my 3rd, we're going to do my 4th and final layer, which is the trickiest one, because we're getting really small at this stage, especially for the top lip with that Cupid's bow. And if you are planning on making a mouth, tag me. I'd love to. Well, tag me anyway. I'd love to see if you're going to make some 3D embroidery with felt. I'd love to see it. Okay, there is our last layer. Now I'm getting pretty small here now. Actually, I've done a better job than I did in my prep felt bits, whatever they're called. Felt layers. This has actually gone better than the one I did prior to the live, so that's good. There we go. Final one. And then it's over. Sort of. Cool. Yes. Voila. Ta-da! And we have all of our little felt layers here. just going to separate those out. There we go. Now, this is when we need our glue. Actually, first we need a sip of wine, because for all that cutting and drawing, it's just heavy work, you know. Now, we need our glue, and we can bring back our embroidery hoop with our design on. Let me just make some space. I don't want to lose any of those little bits. They can fly away quite easily. And again, I learned the hard way with, you know, sometimes I would go straight from this section to the felt layers, and then I would need to do the teeth after I'd glued them all down, which you can do, but I prefer just to get that bit out of the way. I just think it's a bit easier, and then you don't have to be like pressing into the felt or whatever, you've already done it. So we're going to get our glue. Again, I'm using this fabric glue, which is really good, and I'm going to be like pretty liberal with it. Let's see if it's going to come out. Yes. So, whoa. I'm going to be pretty, just make sure it doesn't turn off. Liberal. Especially on the edges, they're the bits that don't like to stick down. Just gonna stick that on there. Let me just tilt that down a bit more. Now you want to make sure that there's especially room there to stitch when we go with our satin. You don't want to go right up to the edge there, because eventually we're going to stitch over this, and otherwise you just have to go into the teeth. So we want to make sure that there's still that little gap, and there should be, because we've you know, we haven't cut out that exact shape. We've gone a bit smaller, and I'm going to do the same with the top. There. Stick that on. Doesn't matter if it looks a bit messy or there's glue, no one's going to see it. And do our next layer. And if you have to if the layers come off, because that's happened to me before, I just haven't used enough glue or it's just not sticking, that's fine. Just, as I said, I'm quite liberal with it now, learning the hard way. We'll make sure they're in the centre of the layer underneath. Last one. Ooh, that is actually quite a lot. Sometimes I like to dibble the edges in the glue just to make sure that they are actually coated. Just dibble that. Go. Nice. Wicked. And there we go. We have glued down our layers. Voila. Now I used to leave it overnight, or I used to leave it until that was completely dry. Which you can do, but sometimes I would find that some of the layers had glued to each other. They haven't glued onto the base, or vice versa. They'd glued onto the base and top layers would come off. And so I'd have to re-glue them again anyway. And sometimes I don't want to wait. Sometimes I want to get onto the fun bit. I want to get onto the, I want to get onto the stitching. So what I've taken to do now is I actually tack the layers down with a bit of thread. And I use just sort of your average sewing thread for this. I just think it just works a little bit better, but you can use whatever. You can use embroidery thread if you like. I probably shouldn't use my teeth, seeing as I have scissors right here, but so I'm using black thread because I have it from from doing my teeth. Also, it creates quite a nice contrast. Now, if you're turning this into a brooch or a patch or anything, ideally you wouldn't have knots on the back. So none of these works have knots on the back because they naturally create lumps. Even if they're not very big lumps, they won't lie flat. So I like to do these with using no knots. And the way I do that is you just sort of, when you're starting, you just scoop the thread with your needle underneath the back. And this is also a good reason why to do the teeth first, because otherwise you wouldn't have any stitching there to do that. And I'm going to leave quite a big tail. I don't want that to come out. So I just scoop that under, and then once I'm done, it'll be secure. I can just trim that tail down. Or just put it, people put a little bit of glue on the back to secure the back. That's fine. And then I'm just going to come up. And what you want to do is make sure you catch the edges of those layers, because they're the bits that like to come undone. And you can do as many stitches as you like. The more you do, the more you're ensuring that it's not going to come off. But oh yeah, I always do that. There we go. You can see I've started to tack it down there. And tacking those edges down, because they're the tricky bits. It's quite satisfying as well. Sometimes I go through the bottom layer. Reconnecting. Are you tacking down horizontally? No, it would be vertically this way. You see that? Those black lines. It wouldn't work to do horizontally because the stitching would be a lot longer, and I don't think it would be as secure. So I'm tacking down over, like I'm going over a hill. And the way this will be the way that you eventually do your satin stitch over the top as well. It's basically just like a preliminary satin. Well, it's not satin, but you know what I mean. Just to make sure that those layers are completely secure. Yes, over all of the edges vertically. And like, as I said, you can do as many as you want. I'm probably doing too much. because I want to make sure that it doesn't come off. But I mean, you could probably just do like 5 and then 5 and then be good to go, but there's nothing worse than a layer coming off, so I'm probably going to run out of thread right at the end. That happens to me quite a lot as well. Because normally when I teach, I always say, don't cut thread longer than your forearm. So otherwise it ties itself into knots, and it's just not very easy to work with. But I break that rule when I do this tacking, because I don't really want to have to sort of like cast off and start again. I think I'm just going to be able to make it. Yeah, great. Just going to do the last one. There we go. I have tacked. And then similarly, like I did with the star, I don't want to tie that in a knot. I don't want any knots. So I'm just going to go under my satin stitch, being careful not to pierce through the other side. Oh. It's a bit fiddly. There we go. So I'm going underneath that satin at the back with my needle, and I'm going to thread the black through there to catch it. I'm just going to trim that off, and then it's done. We are now ready to start stitching over the top of it. Voila. That looks great. So as I said, this is where we're going to stop today, because the bit after that is actually going on to stitching over the top, which takes time, and it might not be relevant to you anyway. But if it is something that you'd be interested in seeing, if you'd be interested in me going through that part and finishing off a patch or a brooch, then let me know, because I can do that. I can do a part 2. But this is the hard bit. We're done. That is going to make your embroidery 3D. It's going to make it stand out, and it's really nice. It feels really nice as well when it's underneath it. It's a really nice effect and saves a lot more time, a lot more money than going over and over again with thread. So I hope that has been useful, and if you are doing this technique, I'd love to see what you make with it. So do tag me. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at rosanna.mcnamara, which I will put in the caption for this live. And I'm doing a whole program of things this month, because February is National Embroidery Month. So this is sort of the first event. But next Friday, I'm going live again with Emma Francis, who is a fabulous local embroidery artist that has done some really lovely aerial shots, bird's eye view shots of local green spaces and local parks. I first came across her when she did Tooting Common last summer, because I think Tooting Newsy shared it, and you can see a little Woodfield pavilion in the corner, and it's really nice. So I'm going to be talking to her about her work next Friday. Then the following Saturday we've got our monthly So What session. That is a very informal, like knit and natter session, where people just bring their own projects. We've got knitting, crochet, embroidery. People are making masks, making clothes, bags, scrunchies, and we just chat. We have a nice time and chat. Skills share a bit as well, if anybody has any crafty questions. But yeah, it's just a nice time, and that happens every month. That's not just this month. So the next one will be on Saturday the 20th, and then to end off the month, I will actually be doing an introduction to embroidery workshop, which is a beginner's workshop. But if you've done embroidery before, you're welcome to join. But that is a workshop completely for beginners, people that have never even seen an embroidery hoop before. So those tickets are for sale now. So if you're interested, or you know someone who might be, they're in the link in our bio, in Woodfield's bio to Eventbrite. There's tickets there. With your ticket, you can get an embroidery kit, which comes with everything that you need. Or if you have your own materials, you can join by donation. As I said, we're a charity, so we really rely on the public supporting us. And if you've liked this video, then I do encourage you to sign up to our mailing list, where you can find out all the cool stuff we're doing, as well as become a member of the charity. It's just £10 a year. That's it. It's less than £1 a month, and that is really great for us. It's a vital source of income that we desperately need right now. And you get to vote at our AGMs as well. And it's really good for funding applications as well. So it helps us get grants. So if that's something you're interested in, and you've loved this video and you want to further your support, do think about becoming a member. Again, the link is in Woodfield's bio. And with that, I will say good night. Thank you. Good evening. I'm not going to bed yet. Haven't even eaten my dinner. But yes, I will say good evening to everybody. Thank you for watching. Tag me in your creations. I'd love to see them, and I hope to see you soon at another one of the events this month, or going forward, especially when the pavilion is open again. So thank you so much, everyone. Cheers. It's a nice sound. And I will see you very soon. Thank you. Bye.